Welcome to Founders Unplugged, hosted by Greg McCallum. Long-form, honest conversations with founders and entrepreneurs from around the world.
Hi, I am Shona Beats. I am a coach and mentor for startup founders across the world, work with founders in the UK, in Europe, and in America. I was the former COO of Headspace, and I grew the company with the two founders and an exceptional starting team from the ground up. So I joined Rich and Andy, the two co-founders of Headspace. They had this extraordinary idea to bring meditation to the masses and had began the journey, and I came across them and was just extraordinarily impressed with what they were doing. And having been on my own journey of experiencing the power and positive impact of meditation, I was thrilled to see what they were doing and just desperate to join them. I'm very lucky to be accepted to join them. So was on that incredible journey for 6 years. We moved the team from the UK to the US. I spent 4 years in Silicon Beach. And ever since leaving Headspace, I have had the privilege of working with multiple startups across many industries, helping them grow and thrive and make a positive impact on the planet. And I love what I do. So very excited to join you today, Gregory, and to chat all about it.
And it's awesome to have you here. I was so glad we were introduced by Anthony Rose, wasn't it, from Seed Legals, who introduced us?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, and I promised I would try and wipe my memory of our initial introduction so that it was all fresh, but I can't. But I'm still going to have to ask you so that you can tell people who are listening and watching about yourself. Yeah, look, a ton of questions. I remember you explained how you first got involved with Headspace. It was it sounded to me like quite a serendipitous kind of situation, because like you said, you'd kind of been thinking about this space, quote unquote space, for a while and started meditating. Is that right? And so started getting into that as a thing anyway. And then a chance encounter kind of led to it. You're going to explain it better than me. Can you kind of repeat what you told when you first met about that story? It was really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it was actually extraordinarily rapid, the whole journey. So I had well and truly burnt out in my career. I was an event producer and director, working for big companies, flying all around the world, burning the candle at both ends, agency work. I think live events inherently are fraught with a lot of adrenaline. Some of these events were thousands and thousands of people, and I would be back to backing, and there was very little time for rest in between. And, I was in my 20s. I thought I was fairly fit and healthy and well. So it was a real shock when I had my first panic attack in a pitch presentation. Luckily, it was a practice. It wasn't to the client, but I was presenting and practicing my slides in the deck. And whilst doing so, I just went into what was like a hole. It was like my vision completely narrowed down. My hearing went. I was still standing and fully capable of standing there, but I just couldn't. Anyway, I had no idea what was going on. But yeah, long story short, that was a panic attack. I wasn't aware of it. And that continued happening. And I kind of went through a period of I think it was about 4 months or so, where this was happening time and time again in meetings. And I was making excuses for it. I would just say I needed the bathroom, get up and leave a meeting. No idea what's happening. And it culminated in one day. I was due to get up to go to work that day. I was doing a presentation at work, and obviously my body was just like, no, you're not. And I just unraveled. It felt like an unraveling. So that was the trigger that led me to meditation. And the way that came about is I went to the doctors and was like, there's something wrong with me. Was told I had anxiety, which didn't make sense to me because I didn't feel I was worried about anything. And I was associating this idea of anxiety with worry. Anyway, I sort of had the offer of meds and, kind of mental health and this little pamphlet. And it just, I don't know, I just felt like I wanted to explore the subject more deeply before I said yes to anything. And so I remember getting on the bus. I lived in Birmingham at the time, and I could barely leave the house. It was really, really intense. And I remember going on the bus in my hoodie with my hood up. I went to Waterstones, or all good bookshops. Am I allowed to advertise for? Anyway, I went to Waterstones and found...
Hashtag not sponsored.
Hashtag not sponsored. And
do they still exist, Waterstones?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, good. I didn't know. I just assumed all bookshops closed down in the 2000s.
They are alive and kicking still. But found a book about meditation, the Mindful Manifesto, and read it and did the practice, and quite instantly felt something move. I felt it gave me access to it was like opening a door to somewhere where I actually genuinely felt like, I think I'm going to get perspective on what's going on here from this place. And ultimately that's what happened. And the sort of aha moment, I talk about it a lot, was this understanding that I am not my thoughts and feelings. And all of a sudden there was a place from which I could observe my thoughts and feelings, but not be completely consumed in them. That was groundbreaking. And I've sort of described it previously as a bit of a operating system update. It was profound. So that happened around the sort of September, November time. And then it was having an positive impact really quite quickly. There was lots of other things I was doing for my well-being at that time. I was seeing a therapist. I was doing lots of yoga. I was having a massage once a week. I decided I would flip all the budget that I spent on alcohol previously to having a massage once a week. Smart move. So quite rapidly, I started to kind of come back to a place of wellness. And having worked for years in an industry where you are tasked with how to help a big organization make its employees more productive or resilient or motivated, and you do all these different things, take them here and there, do these big conferences and team building activities. And I was experiencing something so profound from meditating that in my head, I just thought, well, they all just need to meditate. Every client, like the answer to every client's brief is get them to meditate. So obviously at that point, I'm looking at my own job thinking, well, if I'm going to say that every time somebody comes to the table, I should probably do something about it. Anyway, long story short, I was like starting to plan what it would look like to do an event about meditation and to teach people how to meditate. So I started plotting that, and that was obviously my background. At the same time, I came across Headspace in a magazine, finally was out the house. I was at the hairdressers and saw Headspace and just thought, man, that looks like such a cool brand. And Andy just seemed awesome at explaining meditation in a way that was understandable and mainstream and accessible. So I thought they were like a big business, like they looked so like professional. I was like, oh god, they're going to be a big business. I'm going to really have to like hustle to get in here. So I wrote to them, and I'm smiling because Rich still talks about it as one of the most sort of, he remembers this letter that landed on his doorstep, which I got a girl that I work with to design the letter. And it was one of those flow quizzes, where it's like, if yes, go here, if no, go here. And basically all routes led to us working together. It was either I'm going to work for you or I want you to collaborate with me. So they got the letter at a time where they were really looking to operationalize what was happening. There was a lot of buzz coming their way, a lot of interest coming their way from corporates in particular, because at the beginning Headspace was a live event company. So the idea was that Andy would go and teach meditation in a live event capacity, either to the public, so we were hosting our own live events, or that we would go to a corporate. So obviously with my background in B2B and events and all of that, it was just a really, really good fit. So when they got the letter, we quickly met. It was Valentine's Day, 2011. So that's how rapid it was. It was like the November sort of time I was not leaving my home. By February, I was meeting Rich and Andy down in London. And on my birthday that year, which is March 27th, they offered me, a job, so to speak. It was early days. It was a startup. So it was all a bit kind of scrapped together. But so I joined them at that point. And really, as I say, it was to make this live event company grow and succeed. And it was not that long afterwards that we pivoted to becoming a tech company. So that was unexpected, but quite a defining moment in what happened next, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, you've said so many really, not only is that an interesting story, but you've also touched on like 3 or 4 really interesting things, which we will get to because of they're super fascinating. But the last one there, being that you guys, the Headspace was essentially an events company before it became a tech company. I think I had no idea of that. I think most people probably wouldn't know that, but it kind of goes back to things that in the tech startup space we say a lot, which is an MVP doesn't have to be a software product.
100%.
Most SaaS companies can be a consultancy firm before they're, you know what I mean? Like
100%.
there's always a service that you can start offering first. And I think most people don't realize that. So when they sit down and go, oh no, I can't build this company, I need to go and raise money. It's like, no, you can go out and start building this company right now. And there's always a way. It can be events, it can be consultancy, it can be something. So that's really interesting. Because I had no idea until we spoke the other day and you mentioned that.
Yeah. Well, and I don't think at the time, I don't think at the time there was really any understanding that, I think to your point, I think now, because tech companies and apps are such a thing, I have so many people that quite often come to me and they're like, I'm building an app for this. And the first question I ask is, does it need to be an app?
Right, yeah,
Because
and that should be the first question, because it's like, do we really need any more?
absolutely. Well, especially up until, fairly recently, you're giving a chunk of money away to Apple for the pleasure. And so the thing, so 100% I'm with you. But to your point, like the sort of MVP of it started even well before the event. So before, sort of really the founding story of Headspace began with, Rich and Andy. And I guess Andy's first step of that MVP was coming out of the monastery and into teaching in a clinic. So he had to, at that point, sort of take all the principles and philosophies of what he had learned in monastery and then translate that into a format that he could deliver in a clinic to
like systematize it, kind of thing.
This is it. Yeah. So the language and the techniques, that was all bubbling for years before. And then he met Rich in the clinic, and that's when they agreed to work with each other and sort of found this company. So interestingly, to your point, that like the breadcrumbs and the building of the sort of quality and the integrity and the thing that finally became very famous and loved by millions of people around the world was started many years before. So yeah, I totally agree with you. Whereas a lot of people come to the table now and they're like, I have this idea and I want to build it now. And I'm like, yeah, but what about this tale where you really, chip the edges of this stone to make it a diamond before you pour tons and tons of money into building something that you're just not sure if it's going to be effective or work.
It got there a lot more organically than people realize. And that's the case for a lot of, I would say, the long-standing tech businesses that we see around us. I mean, you look at Netflix, you look at Amazon, you look at Google, right? They all started as something very, very primitive initially.
Absolutely.
Because of building a SaaS company wasn't, like, to your point, wasn't the goal. It wasn't like, oh, well, we're going to do this to get to that. It was like, no, we just want to build this.
Absolutely.
With no idea where it was going to lead. Amazon just wanted to build an online bookshop.
Yeah.
Netflix just wanted to post DVDs to people.
Hi, a friendly reminder to share this episode with your network, like, and subscribe. And if you are feeling really supportive, please consider reviewing the show on the podcast platform of your choice. It all really helps support what we do. Thank you. Now back to the show.
Yeah, it's scrappy.
These were the goals.
It's scrappy. And I also feel like, because if you think about it, in the early days of Headspace, there wasn't this sort of this tech startup culture. I certainly was not exposed to it. It was not something I was particularly aware of. I became aware of it, and obviously that became part of our journey. But there's another piece in that when I talk to people about the early days of Headspace, they're like, really? Which was I remember one of the first tasks I had to do when I joined was we were hosting these live events in a particular place in London, and we wanted our attendees to be able to get lunch nearby. So I was physically going round to like cafes, asking if they would give a discount voucher to our attendees. It was really scrappy, like Del Boy work. And I feel like sometimes when I meet people now, there's this sort of vision of what it is to have a startup, and it feels quite glamorous and, like surely that would be below me to be like traipsing the streets. And it's like, no, that's how it starts.
You're 100% right. I encounter it all the time, and I do a lot of, so I do these 1 hour free go-to-market advisory sessions. Like, my door is basically open to anyone who ever wants an hour of my time. They've got it, right? Just once, obviously, and then after that they have to pay for it. And the amount of times this topic comes up where I just get the sense, I just know the difference between someone that understands that and someone that doesn't. And 90% of the time people don't. And they're not prepared to go out and knock on the doors and do that scrappy stuff. And it's like, that's what you need to be willing to do.
Absolutely.
And I think a lot of it comes from, it's because these are ex-operators that have worked in startups at sort of later stages, or even sometimes earlier stages. But the point is they're funded. They didn't do what the founders did to get there. And sometimes some founders do just get an idea and they just get funded a couple of million, right? That does happen too, but it's not the full story. It's the stories you see on the headlines. The real stuff happens with, like you said, going around, knocking on doors, being scrappy, or like creating really cool letters, to get the gig, like that kind of stuff. That way of thinking is the way to do it. Out the box thinking, right?
Absolutely. No, and I mean, as I say, Andy and Rich did many, many things before even I came on the scene and the rest of the team came on the scene. It really was like you say, I think what people know of Headspace is when Headspace got big and was in the press. And by that point, it has all the trappings of this exciting tech company, which it was. But there's this long tail that came before it, which I think is just less known about, but super exciting, and actually I look back and they were some of the funnest years, those early years when you are really rolling your sleeves up, but getting, I think what was powerful, and I think, and I think this is the true for all founders and all startups, you just need to be constantly listening to your customers. So what we were experiencing was people coming to the event and we would hear from them. We were gathering data then in a very sort of analog way. It was like, please write down literally on a piece of card how you felt today, what was good, what was bad. And so we were relentlessly gathering data and knew it was working. So then, that's the point, isn't it? Then that you should take it to the next level because you're getting 100% positive feedback.
Yeah, I find it reassuring to know that companies like Headspace started that way. I find it reassuring, as opposed to the alternative, which is they had to sit down and somehow find the time to plot out this really intricate architecture for an extraordinarily complicated, like really robust, really sophisticated product, and then somehow find the money, somehow find the customers and deploy it. It's far more reassuring to know that you can actually build a company far more organically and, like you say, actually define what the product is going to be from the customer's input in a human face-to-face way. I find that incredibly reassuring. It feels actually then that the barrier to entry to building a multi-million-dollar tech startup is actually pretty damn low. Like, I can go and rent my community hall, and that's step one to building a multi-billion-dollar company. Like,
100%.
Cool. Like, it doesn't actually, and I think most people kind of look down on that. Like, well, this isn't the right thing to do. How am I going to build the next Google from here? It's like, no, this is the right step.
That is it.
Any step is better than no step, right?
Well, like the reality is that I work with so many companies, and in a way, yes, the world of a startup or any company is this sort of quite wide playbook if you think about it. What do you do with customer service? What do you do with your growth marketing? What do you do with, is it an app? Is it what have you? What do you do about technology? And you can talk about the team that you're hiring and when and how and investors and and the deck and whatnot. But all of that, ultimately, dare I say it, is kind of the same for all companies. Like really, like the playbook is the same to an extent, give or take. The thing that is profoundly different and unique is the thing that you are telling the world that you are going to do for them with the thing that they are going to do that with, if that makes sense. So, and that's the thing to obsess about, really. And I often find that there's a sort of immediate want or need or desire to talk about this whole, how do I do it? And actually, this is the easy bit. Like, this bit is so easy. You could just go on AI now and be like, tell me how to do it. Like, by and large, you're going to get it. The thing that I think you've got to be completely obsessive and ensure is profound is the thing that you're offering and the impact it's going to make, because that is what they will pay for. Or not even pay for, that is what they will give you their time for. And I think we are in an attention economy where our attention is just profoundly being like sucked up left, right and center. I often talk with the people I work with now. It's not even about somebody giving you their money. It's about them giving you their time to even look at you or bring you into their life. And so I feel that, I feel very lucky, and both Rich and Andy were so committed to this piece of the puzzle, and I think really taught me about how important it is just to make sure that this relationship that you hold with one user is the same as 100 users, 1,000 users. And so I think because Andy started very one-on-one, the intention was to retain that experience throughout the whole journey. So obviously when it did get big and we realized that we were able to bring meditation to the masses really fundamentally through the power of the app, there was a desktop version as well. It was, how do we keep as much of this as possible whilst using this technology? But had we not done that piece of the puzzle, or had Andy not invested so much time in that, would this have had the sort of immediate love from people that it had? I was on the phone with an investor yesterday with a client, and he was sharing his story of his first time that he used Headspace. And he was like, I instantly just adored it. I loved it. And I was like, wow, that's great to hear. But it didn't just come from nothing. There was like as I say, quite a journey to get there.
Do you know what? You touch on something that I've always found very hard to articulate, but I'll give it a go, which is that there does appear to be a very recognizable sense of lack of soul in certain software, SaaS solutions. And we can sense it when it's not there. In the same way that if we listen to a piece of music or watch a piece of television or a movie, we can sense when there's the difference between people who have put love into it and it comes from a real genuine place, whether it's a team effort, an individual effort, whatever, versus a slightly cynical, obvious attempt at just getting something out the door to make money. Yeah. Right? We can sense that on such an intuitive level, and I don't really understand where that comes from. Maybe it comes from an evolutionary thing of like being able to tell when someone's telling a story to us in order to, because human beings have told stories for thousands of years. Maybe the difference between telling a story to us in order to manipulate us versus one that has some genuine experience behind it. I don't know, but to be able to tell in a tech product or an app when something has soul, I don't understand how we're capable of that, but people are.
I think
we are.
Yeah, it's a very. I wonder whether in a way, none of the founding team of Headspace had come from the world of technology,
right?
Yeah, I'm like thinking.
Well, and as you said, it was never the intention from the outset to do that. Right?
It wasn't, and I think in a way, perhaps that brings, perhaps that brings something to how it manifested, because you play then with what you would like to experience versus coming at something like the UX for the original version of the app was literally done, like on a piece of paper, like by everyone in the city. It was like, what would this would go there, wouldn't it? And then, I'd like that there. And then, it'd be really cool if like that went there afterwards. It was almost, perhaps there was so much naivety to it that, it was approached, I think, in it from a different mindset, which was, what would we like? How would we like to experience this?
And presumably there was a pretty high level of confidence in the value of the content within it.
100%.
Anyway, so then it kind of almost becomes arbitrary that bit. It's just like, how do we present it in a way that people can access the value, as opposed to how do we make the access to it valuable, which is, I think, the other way around. You know what I mean?
I do.
The wrong way around.
The piece, though, that I do think that, and I'm sometimes torn on this when I'm advising clients, because there's this whole narrative, and I'm probably going to say it wrong, where, it's that you should be embarrassed about the first MVP that you show. There's this whole idea that like put something out there that you're a bit embarrassed by.
Yeah, if you're not embarrassed by it, you've spent too long on it or something like that, right?
I wouldn't say that was the approach that we took at the beginning of the Headspace. Right. And in fact, I think because we were we were looking to demystify meditation. So, that was one of the kind of goals that we talked about very early on, how to demystify meditation. And so the branding became extraordinarily important. And so in a way that's quite different, I think, to a lot of tech startups now, like the branding pillar for us was huge from day one. Anna Charity, dear friend of mine, incredible woman. She was the creative director of Headspace, and it was her everything you sort of see was her vision that came to life. There was another artist beforehand that had done some branding work, but it was quite difficult to replicate in technology because there was a lot of hand drawn. It was beautiful, but it was all hand drawn, so it was quite hard to sort of, So Anna came in and she built what I imagine most people understand Headspace to look and feel like, and did the original animations. And that was a vision that Andy and Richard had, and they selected her, pursued her, I should say. Like, she actually went traveling, and Rich was like hot on her heels. Like, as soon as she was back, we brought her in, and but he saw the vision that was possible with the brand, and he knew that she could bring it to life. But the integrity in that branding is extraordinary. So there's lots that people don't know, and to your point, there was chosen because of the reflection of the teaching lineage. So we didn't talk about that. You don't know that when you're experiencing it, but there is integrity in the color palettes. The circle that you see when on the player, it's an imperfect circle, which again is sort of a philosophical backbone to the teachings. And it's just tiny, tiny little things like that were poured over with authenticity and with integrity and with intention. And so I do think that when people first experienced it, they really felt that without really understanding what was there. But it was a work of art. Like, I call it a work of art versus an app or a piece of technology. I don't think anyone was in it, especially in the early days, thinking it was a tech company in that sense. It was demystifying meditation. It was bringing an experience to people that we hoped would change their lives. So it was definitely with soul. I think that's such a lovely way to describe it.
I'm baffled as to how we have that ability, to pick up on those in the same way that a human being can pick up on the micro expressions of another for the reasons of, understanding whether or not they're being dishonest or malevolent, whatever it might be. We seem to have that same ability to do it with products. Yeah, it's interesting. Maybe it's just, I don't know. I don't know where it comes from, but I did want to, I want to ask a bit about sort of the time where you guys transitioned from an events company over to a tech company in other ways. But I want to just go a little bit back to your introduction about when you're talking about anxiety as someone that suffers from, I don't say like the way suffers, someone who has, who is a functional human being that apparently has depression and anxiety within him. I'm curious to know about that. So the way you described it sounded like you'd never really experienced any of that before. So, but up to that point, had you never had a panic attack, never really had any sort of experience of anxiety, nothing at all? So this was all completely alien to you?
I had not had a panic attack. And no, I hadn't felt anxiety, but I'm caveating that with a big old but, because what I had been doing for many years prior to where I got to was I would drink. I would go out. I loved dancing. I loved clubbing. So I wonder whether now when I look back at it all, I wonder whether I was spending my whole life being busy. I remember my diary was never free. It was like, it was work and something, work and something, work and something. And then the weekend would be full. And I do remember sort of looking ahead in my diary and thinking if I didn't have anything in on a Saturday, I needed to get something in on a Saturday. So I wonder if somebody had said, no, I want you to sit down for a week and do nothing, that I'd have been like, I hear all these feelings that I've been masking and covering up with all this other stuff I've been doing. So, but the point being, so, because when I then had this breakdown, I was like, where's this come from? But actually, if I looked back at it, I was like, oh, well, this was just building, because you were probably having, there was this obviously huge well of stuff underneath the surface that you're just cramming down with fun stuff every week and distraction and distraction and distraction. And the tension was just building and building. And that's how it felt. It was like I was desperately trying to live up here. I'm fine. I'm absolutely fine. And then down here, it's obviously something like a volcano is literally whereas now, I would say since the whole experience, I don't have that kind of lifestyle. I really feel I am much more in tune with my body, perhaps, than I ever was. And so I feel when my mind's racing too much. And I think when you have a regular meditation practice, you see what's going on. It is a lens on, and I'd just never had that lens before. 30 years of my life, and I had never really seen myself. Yeah, I'm sort of scrumpling my face up, but this was how I felt when I started meditating. There was a line that I kept saying to people. I was like, this needs to be as big as Facebook. This should be as big as Facebook. How did my doctor not tell me about it? How do my friends not know about it? How is this not something that is mainstream and known about? Because it's so simple. It's so easy.
Well, the thing that I've always said about a meditation, as someone that has been notoriously bad at it myself, but I mean, it kind of makes sense that it's helpful because it essentially forces people to think, right? Or create an absence of thinking, like one or the other. But in other words, it creates space for the brain to do what it needs to do. That's why I loved your analogy of getting a operating system upgrade.
Yeah.
Because it is very much really, if you're constantly using, you need to eventually turn your laptop off so that it doesn't burn up. Right? Or you need to defrag the hard drive every now and then. You need to, you know what I mean? You need to give it some TLC. It can't just keep running. It's eventually going to stress out. But also beyond that, if it doesn't actually even have an off button or a standby button, or a defrag button in the first place, well, then nothing, just stopping to use it isn't going to be enough. It's still going to start heating. It's still, so it's multi-layered, your analogy.
Well, it is. And I kind of want to come back to something you said. You said, I'm not very good at meditating. And this is something I think Andy taught so well, but is worthwhile reminding ourselves all the time. He always said it's not about being good or bad at meditating, because there is really no ultimate goal of good. You don't get a prize, you know what I mean? Like, it's not like it is actually just the commitment to sit. And so the good or bad is, did I sit this week?
Right.
Do you know what I mean? Like, it's because when you sit, there is no good or bad. Like, it might be a day where your mind is extraordinarily busy, and that's absolutely normal. And I think, funnily enough, I just did a meditation this morning, and that was one of the things he was talking about in it, is your mind is supposed to be busy, and it is supposed to have thoughts, and you are supposed to have feelings. Like, you are organic matter, that you are an amazing being of thoughts and feelings, and they are not intended to not be there. So it is more about making the commitment to sit and observe your organic matter for a period of time. And obviously the more you can commit to sitting and doing that, the more you know or observe, or and even the art of kind of coming back to the breath when you're meditating, like Andy used to describe it, is that's like, obviously when you're down the gym and you're doing reps, it's the art of the rep that kind of builds the strength, and it's the art of actually coming back to it's being distracted in a way isn't a bad thing, because it's the art of being able to come back and quickly catch yourself disappearing off on a train of thought, which is which really is the thing that over time builds up.
Yeah, so it's almost like it's working the muscle of focus, essentially.
Absolutely, yeah.
Which is kind of the enemy of anxiety, because anxiety is I guess the getting carried away with the chaos of overlapping multiple sort of threads of thought.
Yeah,
in some ways.
Yeah,
right? Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I say I'm bad at meditation because in the past, whenever I've tried it, it's always been, the aim has been to try and clear your head of thoughts, and that's just something that I cannot do. No. I'm just not capable of that. And yes, I can do the sort of focusing on breathing and my grounding, being aware of myself, loosening my shoulders, etc., but I cannot stop the thinking. And I think that's the bit that always makes me feel like failing. But if you're saying that isn't necessarily always the goal, then cool, good. Then I might be quite good at it.
I'm not a meditation teacher, but I don't think it's ever the goal. If I'm like, again, if I think of all that, I've done. I think I sort of tried to add it up, and it's at least 4,000 hours that I have sat in meditation practice. And
if you are enjoying this episode and want to support the show, please subscribe with notifications turned on, and let us know your thoughts and opinions in the comments below. This lets YouTube know we are doing something right. Back to the show.
It is no different from the first time I sat to when I sit now. It's just, there's to your point, like nothing, I wouldn't say I've got better or worse or anything, there are.
But you get something out of it regardless.
Absolutely.
That's the point, right?
Yeah. And it gets easier and more comfortable to sit and see chaos, for example. So it's like you're saying, like you're having lots of thoughts, because there's multiple parts to the teaching, and it goes very deep and wide and all sorts. I'm not doing it any justice, and Andy Puddicombe, please, forgive me for this, but there's also the development of the art of compassion for what it is that's coming up. So there's so many different elements to it, but yeah, it's like the gym. You just have to walk in the door and do whatever that day's practice is, and over time, that's when you get the benefits of it. But yeah. Give it another go, knowing perhaps that you don't need to stop thoughts, and maybe you'll...
Well, we talked about this briefly before, but there's the whole mind palace thing, which I've found an incredibly useful kind of concept over the years to essentially perform CBT on myself, which is, again, I think it's very closely linked from my understanding in the literature of kind of to meditation, that they're very much follow similar paths in terms of the state of being you have to get yourself in. But more importantly, that kind of giving yourself a third person view, like you were saying about being able to see yourself. Essentially, that's what it is. But I remember hearing a quote not that long ago, and I've since used it a lot, especially when speaking to entrepreneurs who are about to kind of dip their toe in entrepreneurialism, which is that, and I'm going to butcher it, but it's something along the lines of, it's very difficult to think, because thinking requires you to first have an idea, which in of itself most people don't have. And then you have to, in order to think about that idea, split yourself up into different versions of yourself, sometimes many versions, with all completely opposing views to not only each other, but to you. Right? Which is almost an impossible task. And again, barely anyone does. And then you have to then throw them all your idea and criticize it, pick it apart, and so on. And that is what thinking is. And like when you actually put it like that requires an enormous amount of self-awareness. And it's a very complicated task. And the only way you can ever really think about something in a deeper, meaningful way, whether it's an idea or whatever, right? You have to have built that framework for that to occur.
Yeah, I mean, I am more and more coming round to the realization that there was the playbook of what happened, growing a company like Headspace. But actually, particularly for myself personally, I was doing that journey at the same time as meditating for an hour and a half a day. I did 6 years meditating an hour and a half a day without a day's break. In addition, I was doing other things. I got hugely into 5 rhythms dancing. I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but it's basically where you go into a space and for 2 hours you just move, dance, whatever you want to call it, to music, and it's varied music. And that delivering a level of alchemy for my feelings and emotions that when you are in the world of rapid startup, it is full on, and like every day can be full of adrenaline, full of nerves, full of like bold confidence, full of like you're having to kind of whip up these parts of yourself on a daily basis. And it's brutal. And a lot of people experience burnout. And I had come from burnout, but I did not experience burnout as I was going through Headspace, which is extraordinary, but not when I look at what I was doing, because I was developing awareness, which meant, to your point, I could sit in a meeting, somebody could say something and maybe it would trigger me. And maybe it would trigger me because of personal reasons. And I would quite quickly clock it and go, that's what's going. So within seconds, it was gone. And I was back at the table with no ego, able to give a really solid decision or response or answer or contribution to whatever was coming up. So, I'm working on something now to really talk about this more broadly, but this idea of kind of a level of wisdom at the same time as the sort of other intelligence and playbook that you need to grow something, I think is really powerful. Yeah, there's a strength of body doing various practices. I find a lot of founders in particular invest a lot in maybe keeping themselves well, and they're drinking, especially I was in LA, so you can imagine what it was like everyone is really doing well with what they're consuming. But I think there's something about kind of how do you hack and how do you develop wisdom, a level of wisdom that will help you show up as a leader or a founder, which gives you like the edge, it like gives you another level of edge that I'm not sure you would get if you didn't train in it. Like I love Mel Robbins, her new book, The Let Them Theory. And it's this whole kind of idea that you sort of, if somebody has a point of view or opinion about it, you let them. And I haven't read the book, caveat, but I love the principle. And I just think that when you meditate, that's what happens, right? Like that just inevitably happens through that practice. Again, there was a few moments where I was like, this is working, meditating, kind of out of nowhere. And one was, I was on Oxford Street and I went into a shop for something, and I don't know, it was a card. And I remember kind of squeezing past somebody, but not that it was anything in particular. And then literally less than a minute later, this woman came up and kind of buffed me on the back and was like right up in my face, like, how dare you push me? Like really, and obviously my body went into fight or flight instantly because, you feel under threat. And she left and I could really feel my body. And I remember in my head thinking, oh my God, I'm going to go back to the office and tell Maria about this. Oh my God, you start playing out how you're going to like get justice out of this experience. That's just, I need to talk about it. I need to talk about it. And oh God, like raged. I literally bought the card, still feeling this way, got to the door. So I'm not feeling anything. And I have no need to talk about this, and I'm good, and I will just move on with my life. And I was like, wow, that has never happened before. It's, and like, think of the efficiency. Like, think of the time I would have wasted getting back to the office and going, "Ah," and instead I got back to the office and got on with my job. And
then going home and stewing over it and thinking about it in that evening and the next day. Like, we do that all the time. We replay scenarios, social interactions in our heads all the time. Yeah. And this is the thing, going back to the subject of anxiety and depression, I love the description I've heard of this before, which is, depression is lamenting over the things that have been, and anxiety is lamenting over the things that have yet to pass. Like, it's a perfect description of it, because, just in that example, it's like that you can fall into that trap so easily when you run over interactions of like, oh, I should have done that, next time I'll do this.
Yeah.
I should have done that, next time I'll do this. Like, okay, there's a certain amount of preparation you have to have from a social perspective, but to always regret something and then say, next time I'm going to be better, I'm going to do this, you're just shitting on yourself, basically.
Absolutely.
And you're not doing anything productive about that. Instead, just focus on you,
Absolutely. It's definitely, I mean, as I say, for me, it's I think one of my strongest traits is being a very good web thinker. So again, if I think back to, when you're spinning so many plates, sort of operationally, it was spinning multiple plates all the time. So you are constantly web thinking your way through everything. Like, you web think your way through like a conversation. Like, how am I going to approach this conversation? What do I want to get out of it? How do I prep for it? And my existence when I was working at Headspace was doing this thousands of times a day with thousands of different things. Like, it was relentless. And in a way, that way of thinking is probably how I just approach my general day-to-day. I overthink, and it's a great thing for me when I'm in a position like that, because you are sort of overthinking every possibility, which therefore means that you're sort of bringing as much data as possible. It's a bit like what you said about, I love what you were describing about the different people and how they would approach it. Like, that's what you've got to do when you're marketing. Yep. Like, how is this going to land with this person or this person? And is this our user profile? And what
you have to interrogate everything.
Absolutely everything. Every hire, every decision, every commitment of funds.
And you're looking at micro and macro simultaneously, which is an incredibly difficult thing to do.
Yeah, zoom up, zoom down, side. So these different practices that I was doing, the 5 rhythms, the meditating, I journaled a lot, even sort of reading philosophy and understanding how to kind of rise above all the chaos and like have a connection outside. There were so many different things that I was doing, which were allowing me to bring that kind of mindset to my day, but not have it spill into like the hours afterwards, if that makes sense. So you ultimately are actually getting some level of respite. But yeah, it's hard. Like, we train our brains in a very particular way, and to an extent, it almost then trips us up, doesn't it?
It can, yeah. I mean, I think the way it trips me up personally, obviously I can't speak for everyone, but is often it clouds that sometimes the solution is far simpler.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. To whatever it might be in front of me. That's usually, when it comes to like sort of family life, or, especially with my kids. Like, I found that, like with my kids, especially, like I will overcomplicate it. I'm looking at, and obviously with kids, that's the ultimate sort of macro, micro web thinking thing, because you're thinking, not only do I need to keep this thing alive that's in front of me, but then also I've got to raise them to become a grown-up. And so you're thinking of everything, of the here and now, the next week when they go at school, the next month, the next term, the next year, the next 5 years, the next 20 years, the next 50 years. You're thinking of everything simultaneously.
Yeah.
And sometimes I think the error in overthinking being a parent, as useful as it is just sometimes they just need that hug. Like, or they just need that thing. Like, don't overthink that. Just do that.
Just do that.
And don't stay up all night thinking about it to that extent.
Yeah. I think you're spot on. And there's a technique that I use, and I've used it with most clients that I work with, and it has always provided a level of insight that is profound, whichever way it comes. And it's essentially, it's probably heard of coactive coaching. It originated from that book, and I've sort of tweaked it slightly, but it's essentially where you sort of zoom forward 20 years and then you sort of speak to yourself, your sort of elder version of yourself, and you sort of ask it some questions. And in doing that, and the amazing thing is that if you think about why we love movies so much, we are so able to feel something if we visualize it and take ourselves through the journey. So it really will make an impact. It's not, but in meeting yourself 20 years from now, it provides such an extraordinary sense of perspective, altitude almost from our current, like you zoom out and you give yourself some altitude and you sort of look back. And quite often in the looking back, because you're now sort of seeing yourself a bit wiser, perhaps, and a bit older, to your point, you're like, just a hug would be great. It's like, God, yes. But I think that this is kind of what I mean about...
That's probably what I would do if I met myself, to be honest.
Yeah.
Just give myself a hug. Be like, it's all going to be all right.
Absolutely.
Sometimes simple is best. Yeah. It's all going to be all right, man.
I had one client who I said, what did, obviously did finish the bed, and he came back and he just said that what came through loud and clear was trust yourself. And that was it. And I was like, there you go. And it's...
Yeah, that's a good one. Is this meant to be like an idealized version of yourself then? How do you arrive at what the characteristics are of that particular version of yourself? Because if it's me, am I thinking this is something to aspire to? Is that the idea? Or is it not as specific as... Am I overthinking it?
Well, no. I guess maybe that's the art of the... I think it's really interesting. Like, so when I first came...
Can I be a millionaire? Is that okay?
Yes, absolutely fine. I think that, but I guess this is the point, right? It's like,
yeah.
I feel like, so I get a lot of people often want to work with me, and I think they're often looking for, when I first left Headspace and I first started working with people, I was doing a lot of advising and a lot of sharing what I knew and what I thought would work, etc. But the reality is, it just that only goes so far, and it is very much about, it will always be about you as a founder. It will always be about you in your leadership position, what you do when you get up in the morning and how you show up with your team and everything. So that's when I kind of move very specifically into coaching and the techniques and the art around coaching, because then you can double it up. It's like I can give you a bit of a playbook, we can soundboard an idea or a point of view about go to market or your pitch deck or your team or who the next hire is. But ultimately, it's not me doing it. It's going to be you. So really what I need to do is like bring the absolute best out of you, bring out your empowerment and your integrity and your authenticity. So to answer your question, I don't know what you would visualize when I take you through that visualization and I ask you to imagine yourself 20 years from now. Who knows what would come up in that moment? But normally what I have found happens with clients is that they imagine what they need to imagine. And there's what I would say from the descriptions that people have given me when they've gone through the process is I think we are perhaps a little kinder or lenient on our future selves than we may be on our day-to-day selves. So, so who knows? But the art of even exploring it, and at the end of the day, you could do that practice every week, and you may find something different. But I think the art of exploring is where the insights and the intuitions come from. And I do think that is something that we should all do on a regular basis, is tap into those sides of ourselves to really see what the opportunity is. And the sort of inner knowing of what the right next step is.
It sounds fascinating and something that, I can totally see why it'd be incredibly important for people to explore. I think, knowing myself, I'm already overthinking it. I'm already thinking, do you know what? Maybe it'd be really good to meet a version of myself that's homeless. And then I can give myself some really important cautionary warnings, Or maybe I might encounter another version of myself and he says, what are you doing here? You're going to break the time-space continuum. Get back.
That's your head,
and then nuclear bombs start getting, you know what I mean? And now I'm reading too much sci-fi. So there you go.
Yeah. Head over heart. Head is strong. Yeah. Head is strong.
We've come to the end of part one already. Can you believe it? It goes incredibly quickly. So we'll end it there for those watching and listening. But for us, we're going to have a quick break and then we're going to go straight back into it. So if you are listening or watching, thank you very much. Come back in a couple of days, subscribe, turn the notification bell on and all that nonsense. And then that way you'll get notified when part two comes out. So that's end of part one.
Thank you for listening and or watching. Subscribe with notifications turned on to get notified when part two comes out. While you wait, please join in the conversation in the comments below.